The manila envelope wasn't the hardest thing I brought to that dinner. The hardest thing was deciding not to cry. I sat in the driveway for a moment before going in. The house my daughter and son-in-law bought 3 years ago. The one I helped make possible had new landscaping out front. River stone borders, those ornamental grasses that cost a fortune to install. I noticed a second vehicle in the garage when the door rolled up. A new one. Black, the kind with the heated seats and the panoramic roof. I didn't say anything. I unbuckled seatbelt, picked up the wine I'd brought, and walked to the front door. My daughter, Nadia, met me in the foyer with a hug that lingered a half-second too long, the kind of hug that means something is coming. "Mom, you look great! Come in, come in!" Her husband, Mark, called hello from the kitchen. My grandson, Oliver, he'd just turned 2, came toddling over in his socks and crashed into my knees. I picked him up and held him for a moment, his little hands patting my face. He smelled like soap and something sweet. I kissed his cheek. Whatever happened at dinner, I told myself this part was still real. The house smelled like roasting chicken. Nadia had set the table properly, the good placemats, the wine glasses, the cloth napkins folded into triangles. I noticed immediately that it was only the 3 of us plus Oliver. No friends joining, no other family. A sit-down dinner with your mother, table set like a special occasion, on a Tuesday in October. I've been a bookkeeper for 31 years. I know when someone is preparing to make a presentation. I set the wine on the counter and watched Mark slice the chicken with the careful efficiency of a man who had rehearsed his evening. He was pleasant. He offered me sparkling water, asked about my drive from Barrie, said the traffic on the 400 must have been brutal. I agreed. We did this dance for 20 minutes, through the salad and the bread and the first glass of wine. Then Nadia put her fork down. "Mom," she said, "we've been thinking about Oliver, about the future, and honestly, about you." I took a sip of wine and waited. What they laid out over the next 40 minutes was a plan. It had been thought through. Mark talked about daycare costs. $2,300 a month at the center, Oliver was currently registered for, plus the waitlist they were still on for the French immersion program, which would run even higher. Nadia talked about her maternity leave ending in January and the anxiety she felt about going back to her job at the engineering firm. They talked about their schedule, their commutes, the mental load, the cost of living in Barrie since they'd relocated from Toronto. Then Mark said it. "We were thinking, what if you moved in with us? Took care of Oliver full-time? You could retire from the firm." "You've been talking about retiring for years, Mom. This way you'd have family around you. You wouldn't be alone in that house, and we could really use the help." Nadia reached across and touched my hand. "It would mean the world to us," she said. I looked at the 2 of them. I looked at Oliver, who was pushing a piece of carrot around his tray with complete concentration. I looked at the cloth napkins and the wine glasses and the new landscaping outside and the black SUV in the garage. "Tell me more about what this would look like," I said, evenly, pleasantly. They told me more. I would sell my house in Barrie, the one I'd paid off 13 years ago, the one I'd refinished the floors in myself the summer after the divorce, the one with the garden I'd planted from seed. Sell it, take the proceeds, use a portion toward a granny suite conversion in their basement, help with shared household expenses. In return, I would have family, I would have purpose. I would be there every day when Oliver woke up, every evening when Nadia and Mark came home. And Mark mentioned this gently, almost as an aside, since I'd be living there and not paying rent, I probably wouldn't need my income from the firm anymore. I could wind things down. Focus on the grandchild. "You'd basically be trading your mortgage for your daycare costs," Mark said, and smiled. "Everybody wins." I smiled back. "Let me ask you something," I said. "What does Sandra think about this?" Sandra is Mark's mother. She lives 20 minutes away in Innisfil. She retired 2 years ago from her job at the school board. She has, to my knowledge, no standing plans on Thursdays. There was a small pause. "Sandra has her routines," Nadia said carefully. "She's not really in a position to commit to something full-time." "I see," I said. I excused myself to use the washroom. I stood at the sink for a moment and looked at myself in the mirror, 63 years old. I have good bones, my mother always said. My hair had gone mostly silver and I'd stopped fighting it. I had on the earrings my friend Margot gave me for my birthday. I told myself, do not cry, not here. I came back to the table and I picked up my wine. This is a generous offer, I said. I want to make sure I understand it properly. You'd like me to sell my house, move into your basement, stop working, and care for Oliver full time. And in return, I would have, what exactly? A room in your home? It's not just a room, Mom, it's a suite. A suite, I agreed, with shared expenses, which I would contribute to. With the proceeds from selling my house, it's an investment, Mark said. In the family, in Oliver's future. Is it in the mortgage? I asked. Another pause. We'd work that out, Mark said. Legally, eventually. There it was. I'm a bookkeeper. I've been managing other people's numbers for 31 years. I've seen what we'd work that out legally, eventually. Looks like when the relationship sours and someone needs to sell. I've seen it. Cost people everything. But I didn't say any of that yet. Instead, I asked about the daycare center. How much was it, exactly? Per month? $2,300, Mark said, and that's just for 3 days a week, which is insane, honestly. If we needed full coverage, it'd be closer to $3,000. And the French immersion wait list, that's separate? That's at a different center. Yeah, probably $2,800 when a spot opens. What does your take-home look like? I asked, conversationally. Mother, between the two of you. Nadia glanced at Mark. Mom, I don't think. You're asking me to sell my home, I said, still pleasantly. I think I'm allowed to ask what your household income is. Mark leaned back. Combined, we're around $215,000 before tax. Maybe a bit more this year if my year-end bonus comes through. Okay, I said. And the mortgage here, what's the monthly payment? The number they gave me was not small. They'd gotten into the house in 2022, when rates were still low, but they'd had to go variable, and the renewal had hit them badly. The new payment was $3,400 a month on a house they'd stretched to afford in the first place. I set down my wine glass. And the car? I asked, nodding toward the garage. The new one. A Beat. That's a lease, Mark said. It's not. That's a separate thing. What's the monthly on the lease? He told me. It was $1,800. I nodded. I did not write anything down. I didn't need to. I've been adding columns in my head since I was 12 years old, sitting at my father's kitchen table going over his shop accounts. You mentioned Sandra has her routines, I said, turning to my daughter. Does she watch Oliver at all currently? She comes by on Sundays sometimes, Nadia said. Just Sundays. She has her bridge club, and she goes to Florida in February. Right, I said. And the daycare you're currently using, the $2,300 a month, that covers how many days per week? 3. We need 2 more days of coverage. Mark's mom sometimes does Thursdays, but it's not reliable. So she watches Oliver sometimes on Thursdays, sometimes. Maybe once or twice a month. Is she paid for that? No, Nadia said. She just does it. I looked at my daughter, my bright, accomplished daughter who had her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubbornness. She was 34 years old, and she was sitting across from me at a table she'd set very carefully, asking me to dismantle my life. I brought something, I said. I reached for my bag and took out the envelope. I want to say here, I had not come to that dinner with the intention of doing this. I'd brought the envelope because I'd been working on something at home, my own numbers, and I'd had a feeling, the kind of feeling you get when your daughter's texts start having a particular tone, when the dinner invitation is for a Tuesday in October and not a weekend, when the hug in the foyer lingers a half second too long. I'd had a feeling. So I'd done what I always do when I have a feeling. I sat down at my kitchen table with my calculator and a legal pad, and I worked through the numbers, my numbers, their numbers, as best I could estimate, and I put it all in an envelope, and I brought it with me, not knowing if I'd need it. I needed it. The sheet I put on the table was 3 pages, held together with a paperclip. My house is worth about $610,000, I said. That's a conservative estimate, based on what's sold on my street this spring. After commission and legal fees, I'd net roughly $585,000. You've mentioned a basement suite conversion. Those run between $80,000 and $150,000, depending on what's included. Let's say $100, 0. That leaves me with $485,000. Nadia was very still. If I invest that at 4% conservatively, GAC ladder, nothing fancy. That's about $19,400 a year in income. On top of my CPP when I take it at 65, which will be approximately $8,400 a year. And my OAS at 65, another $8,600 or so. That gives me roughly $36,000 a year, before tax said. That's workable. The median cost of a 2-bedroom apartment in Barrie right now is $2,100 a month, I continued. That's $25,200 a year, which leaves me $10,800 for everything else. Food, medications, car insurance, clothing, anything I might want to do before I'm too old to do it. That's $900 a month. I paused. I am 63 years old. If I stop working now, I have potentially 30 years ahead of me. On $900 a month in discretionary income, the table was very quiet. Oliver had fallen asleep in his high chair, his head tipped to the side. That scenario assumes I sell my house and give you $100,000 of the proceeds for a suite, I continued. A suite I would not own. In a home I would not be on title for. In an arrangement that has no legal structure yet. Mark opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said, gently. He closed it. I have also calculated what full-time childcare costs you, I said, if I am not in the picture. At your current center, full-time for 5 days a week would be approximately $3,000 a month. That's $36,000 a year, out of your combined net household income, which I'm estimating at roughly $155,000 after tax. Daycare would be 23% of your net income. I let that land. That is significant. I understand why you're looking for alternatives. Nadia's eyes were bright. I couldn't tell if she was about to argue or cry. But here's the thing, I said. I also looked at your other monthly expenses. I've been helping you since you bought this house. I know what I've seen. The mortgage at $3,400. The lease on the new SUV at $1,100. I know you have groceries and utilities and Oliver's registered activities. I know Mark's golf membership renewed in May because he mentioned it at Thanksgiving. Those run around $3,500 a year for the kind of club he uses. I know Nadia's Orange Theory membership is around $200 a month because she mentioned it. I'm not criticizing any of it. These are choices you make with your own income. But Mom, you are asking me, I said, to give up my home, my career, and the next 30 years of my independence to solve a budget problem that exists in part because of spending decisions you are still making. The chicken had gone cold. The candles Nadia had lit were getting low. Mark said, that's not fair. Cost of living has. I know what cost of living has done, I said. I live in it too. I also know that Sandra's Thursdays are free. I know the daycare center has a part-time option for 2 days a week that would cost $1,380 a month instead of $2,300. I know that a newer, slightly smaller SUV could be leased for $300 less a month. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you there are options inside your own budget that don't require me to liquidate my assets and move into your basement. Nadia pushed back her chair and stood up. She walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink with her back to me. Mark sat across the table looking at the pages I'd put down. I waited. After a moment he said, You came prepared. You came prepared. I came to dinner, I said. He looked up. You set this table, I said, on a Tuesday in October. You made a whole chicken. You had a plan. I picked up my wine glass and finished the last inch of it. So did I. Nadia turned around from the sink. Her eyes were red. I'm scared, Mom, okay? I'm scared about going back to work and not knowing where Oliver is. And I'm scared about the mortgage. And I thought maybe this was a solution that worked for everyone. She was my daughter. She was 34 and scared, and her voice cracked on the last word, and I wanted to go to her and hold her the way I'd held her at 3 in the morning when she had nightmares. I got up. I walked to the kitchen and I put my arms around her. I know, I said. I know you're scared. And I am not saying no to being in Oliver's life. I am not saying no to helping. I'm saying no to this plan, the way it's structured, because it would hurt me financially in ways that cannot be undone. She cried a little against my shoulder. I rubbed her back. What would help? She asked. Let's talk about that, I said. Actually talk. Not a presentation, a conversation. We went back to the table. Mark poured more wine. Oliver slept. Over the next hour, we talked through what was actually possible. I could take Oliver 2 days a week, not every day, 2 days, and not for free, because my time has value and establishing that precedent matters. The rate we eventually named was less than the daycare center, more than zero, a number that acknowledged what I was giving, without pretending it cost me nothing. I would not sell my house. I was clear on that. My house is my security and my independence, and the thing I get to close the door of at the end of whatever kind of day I've had. Mark would call Sandra, actually call, not hint around it, and ask directly whether she'd commit to Thursdays, a real commitment, recurring on the calendar. They would look at their other expenses. I didn't tell them what to cut. That wasn't my place. But I named the fact that it needed to happen, and I told Nadia something I'd been thinking about on the drive down. "You're 34, I said. When I was 34, I was in a marriage that was ending and I had a 6-year-old and I was terrified. And I figured it out, not because someone solved it for me, because I had to." I looked at her. "You're going to figure this out. You're resourceful. You're good at your job. Oliver is going to be fine, but you have to be willing to work with what's real instead of waiting for a rescue." She nodded. She was wiping her face with one of the cloth napkins. "I don't want a rescue," she said quietly. "I just wanted my mum." That one landed. "I'm here," I said. "I'm going to keep being here, but I need to be able to stay standing to do that." "Do you understand the difference?" She said she did. I helped clear the table. I kissed Oliver on his soft head while he slept. I hugged my daughter properly, without the half-second of agenda in it, and I told her I loved her. I shook Mark's hand, which made him laugh a little, and I told him I liked the landscaping out front. I drove back up the 400 in the dark. The radio was on, but I wasn't listening to it. I was thinking about my house, the floors I'd refinished, the garden that was putting itself to sleep for winter. I was thinking about my legal pad still on the kitchen counter, with all the numbers I'd worked through on Sunday afternoon, alone with my tea. I was thinking about the envelope. Someone had once told me. A client, years ago, a woman who'd come through a very bad divorce and rebuilt herself from almost nothing, she told me. The numbers don't lie. That's what makes them hard. And that's what makes them kind. I'd thought about that a lot over the years. I thought about it again on the drive home. The chicken had gone cold, and the candles had burned low, and my daughter had cried into a cloth napkin, and none of it was what any of us had wanted the evening to be. But we'd gotten to something true. Sometimes you have to go through the hard version of a conversation to find the real one underneath. I pulled into my driveway. I sat for a moment before getting out. My porch light was on. I always leave it on when I go out at night, habit from when Nadia was small, so she could always see the house from the street. Old habits. I unlocked the door, put my bag down, filled a glass of water at the kitchen sink. The legal pad was where I'd left it. I picked it up and looked at the numbers one more time, all those columns I'd sat with on a Sunday, and then I set it on top of the recycling. I didn't need it anymore. The envelope had done what envelopes do. It had held something until the right moment, and then it had let it go.